Hello, everyone. My computer is kind of hanging, so let me just close Microsoft Excel. Maybe that's what's doing it. I don't know. Looks like we're starting off with some fun technical things, but I see a bunch of you here, so the internet's working. That's great. Um, hello, hello, hello. Welcome. I see Sarah, Mike, Ashley, Kimberly, Joella, Jordana. So hello to those of you who are already here. I know there are more of you than that, so please pop in the chat and say hello. So we have until 3:30 today. I'm going to zip through as many questions as I can. We did get a lot of questions again, so I can't guarantee we will get to all of them today, but I will do my very best. Last time I said that, and I managed to get through all of them. So again, I will do my best. And I see Toby here, and Marianne here, and Janice here. Hello, Janice. It's been the longest time, which usually is good. Usually that's good news. So I would love to have you tell me in the chat if it's good news that I haven't seen you for a while. Sometimes people are just busy, and that's okay too. That can also just be good news. So, okay, so starting with the question here from Celine. So PPPD and PTSD. Okay, so Celine is saying there's a group of researchers who are studying PPPD as a possible somatic form of PTSD. This blew my mind and helped me reframe my symptoms. I've tried to search for that study, but I'm guessing it hasn't been published yet. You know, it has. I believe that it has. Give me just a moment here. I actually corresponded with the author briefly. If I can find that email, I'll be able to tell you where the article is. Um, 1 second. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. So this is all. This is not PPPD related. Just give me one more second, guys. If I can find it, I will. I will find it. So basically, okay. So there's a study that just came out this year by a group of researchers that basically they're looking at like precipitating factors that lead to PPPD. Like basically, how can we predict when someone has PPPD or not, when someone is going to have PPPD? Basically, their conclusion was that the psychological and behavioral responses are the most likely predictors of PPPD rather than the severity of changes on vestibular testing. They, I know they've talked about in a previous study, they're not looking at PTSD specifically, which is what I think they should be doing, because for of those factors that they just talked about, these precipitating factors like behavioral and psychological changes, who's most prone to PTSD? People who've already had PTSD, people who've already had trauma. So to me, like the duh question that should be asked now is, okay, does pre-existing PTSD um, or other types of difficult life or stressful situations, does that make someone more likely to get PPPD? And I think it's obvious to me that the answer is yes. But I know that they have an article where they specifically talked about this. Um, yeah, I'm not seeing it, but I'll look for it, Celine, and if I can find that particular article, then I will link to it. I just can tell you that this is beginning to become more accepted. Again, I just think there are some leaps that they're not making that I'm making that others in the mind body world have already made, that they would behoove them to take those leaps too, and to say, okay, well, if PPPD is a form of vestibular PTSD, then what factors predispose other people in other situations to PTSD? We should be looking at those factors as well. Okay. Um, all right. So here we go. So back to the questions. So Sherry answered this question in writing. So moving on to Renata's question. Okay. So Renata is wondering about perfectionism in reaction, like specifically in regards to like doing the work of our community, the work. Um, so Renata says, okay, I'm watching your videos, reading every info available religiously. I feel frustrated when I must take care of anything else during the day besides focusing on my recovery. Gosh, put your hand up if you have felt like that during your recovery. I feel like I became a maniac and it made my symptoms worse because all my focus is on dizzy stuff. So, how much is too much, even if I watch or read the good stuff and not WebMD? great question, Renata. So there is absolutely such a thing as too much. And look, it's very hard for me to give like advice that applies to everyone because some of you are just so different. Not some of you, all of you are very different from each other. What I can say is that if you recognize this in yourself, great job. First of all, you're already halfway there just recognizing that this is going on because yes, it is a problem. It is increasing your focus on symptoms is not helpful. Um, One thing that again just kind of comes to mind is asking yourself the question, what am I worried might happen if I don't focus on my recovery in this way? And I think it's going to come back to I'm worried I'm not going to get better. I feel like I have to do all this. Otherwise, this is my last hope, blah, blah, blah. So just kind of recognizing that that stuff is probably there, putting pressure on you would be really helpful because that can also just help you come up with ways of dealing with it differently. But bottom line, I say that I tell people to set boundaries with their work. It is reasonable to do things again, depending on where you're at. If you're super, super, super duper anxious, and you're just super debilitated, it makes sense to do more. If you're doing more in life, then it makes sense to reserve some time at the beginning and or end of each day to do check-ins, to do a little, a meditation or somatic tracking, or maybe taking a break in the middle of the day to do those things. But I would suggest being clear, like setting boundaries around what you're doing and not doing too much, which again, it is a titration process for most of you. I've been seeing new clients again recently and I just it just strikes me every time I take on a new client how different it is. Like the advice I give people is so different just depending on like their particular circumstances. So my suggestion is Renata to observe. So to say, okay, cool. So Unit says to set boundaries. So I'm going to set aside specific times during the day to do this work. And then the rest of the time my job is to live a meaningful life, find joy, connect to other people, etc. And see what happens when you devote that period of time. Like say I'm going to do this for a week and see what happens. And if it feels like I just don't feel like I'm getting enough insight out of my journaling or it feels like I just don't have enough time to sit with myself, the somatic tracking, it just feels like I'm rushed, then maybe you need to adjust that. But I think generally people start to adjust down rather than adjusting up because what they start to find is, wow, I'm really spending too much time on this. I'm spending too much time focusing my brain on the symptoms rather than doing something better with my time. So, recommended maximum dosage of Dr. Yo per day depends on how despairing you are. The more despairing you are, I think the more Dr. Yo you might need. Um, I'm sorry. I don't mean like Dr. Yo like me. I think of like Dr. Yo stuff, like the reassurance and the videos and the Q&As and all that stuff. But I think that if you're somewhat functional, if you're relatively functional, you're just miserable, then twice a day for discrete periods of time is plenty. And I personally just set limits on excuse me on when and for how long I do any kind of social media thing, even if it's for the purpose of something good. So yeah. Yeah, titration process, Joella says she likes that. Thank you. I don't know where sometimes the metaphors that come out of my mouth are I don't know where they come from. Yeah. So and in your case, Renata, you're saying you're doing a lot of your everyday tasks. I'm sorry. I just had to cough there. Um, so you say you're doing most of your everyday tasks and you're already quite busy. So to me, it seems like devoting a little bit of time in the morning to having some extra space for self-care and then devoting a little bit of time at the end of the day or maybe a little bit more time to journaling, to watching new things, or maybe during a walk, okay, during this discrete period of time when I walk, I'm going to listen to the latest Q&A or I'm going to listen to a meeting replay or whatever it is. But that's it. I'm not going to let that like bleed into all the other stuff that I'm doing. I guarantee you in general, Renata, less is more when it comes to this stuff. Quality over quantity. So just hope that that helps. Again, I know people want very specific answers, and it's so hard for me to give them to you. So, anyway, moving on to Brandon's question. I talk about parts. He says, essentially embracing. You talk a lot about parts Is the ultimate end goal in any parts work essentially to be embracing, making meaning, and being grateful for the part of the brain that's protecting oneself, aka level 4? Yeah, I'd say so, yeah. I think that may look different for different parts of us, right? Our ultimate goals. Okay, here, I'll put that there. Um, that may look different for different parts of us because y- y- relationships are always two ways, right? So if you think of your children, Brandon, I know you have more than one child, right? So I have two children, and I have different relationships with them. I love them both. I love them both, but the quality of the relationship is different because they're different. So the quality of the relationship you might have with your parts, right, is going to look different based on your relationship with it. So ultimately, the commonalities are like acceptance, and um, embrace. I guess embracing is one way to think about it, but sometimes meaning, maybe, maybe not. I mean, sometimes it's more just like kinda knowing that this is a part of you and it's okay that it's there. I think accepting and embracing are really more of the words that I would use. Yeah, being grateful for, yeah, I guess you could put that in there, a little self-compassion. Okay, so Brandon asks, when neural circuit dizziness is gone, will we be able to go into fight or flight without having symptoms? Yes. Um, will it always be a trigger for the rest of our lives for neural circuit dizziness symptoms since the brain has that circuit? No, and you can ask Pippa about this. Pippa's not dizzy. Like Pippa has anxious moments every day, right? Just as we all do. Pippa has children and she has multiple jobs and she's working with other people who are dealing with dizziness. She's not dealing with dizziness, but other people other than you guys. She's working with people. Um, I guess it's not other than you guys. Okay, sorry. She's working with people with dizziness. That's what I'm trying to say. She's doing some trainings. Like there's just a lot of stuff going on in Pippa's life. She gets anxious, I'm sure, at least once every day. She does not have dizziness every day. So, no, fight, flight, freeze is not always going to lead to dizziness symptoms. It's g generally, from what I've seen, it tends to be kind of in the more extreme situations when things are being accumulated and not tended to. But occasionally, people are going to have flashes of those sensations because, again, um, I it's kind of I don't wanna say normal because I know what you're experiencing right now or what you have been experiencing, Brandon is not normal, but, you know, the other day, I was really I can't remember what it was. I just felt overwhelmed, and I had a little dizziness, and I wouldn't have even noticed it because my brain isn't really attached to dizziness, so but I noticed because of you guys, because I pay attention to these things for you guys, and to me, it was just so not alarming, like, it was just so not a big deal. I didn't break stride. It was just like, "Yeah, I'm overwhelmed right now. Of course, I don't feel great." I don't know, it just wasn't that big of a deal. So, I you could potentially have dizziness sensations sometimes when you have fight or flight. Will those dizziness be big enough sensations to actually be a big deal or something that you notice or bothers you? That's a completely separate question, and the answer is no. Once you recover from neural circuit dizziness, that's that's kind of the definition. It's no they're no longer bothersome, even if once in a while you have a sensation. Okay. Um, yeah, so you're asking about big T versus little T traumas. So guys, Brandon is referencing an interview here. So actually, the interview is out now. So I'm going to defer to the interview. So this is from the interview with Melissa Spalding. So that's under content previews and requests. So if you go into the community and go to content previews and requests, you'll go in there and you'll see it's maroon. I think it's like a red color, and it's EMDR therapy. It's it's probably toward the beginning of the interview, but it is time stamped anyway. So that she defines big T and little t traumas, and she gives some examples of that as well. Okay. Yes. Okay. And Joella is just confirming what I said earlier, which is really helpful. Hey, Brandon. She didn't say this. I'm saying, hey, Brandon. She says, I'm in the middle of possibly moving across the country. Where are you going, Joella? You can't leave Utah. It's so beautiful. And she says, I've had brief moments of panic and anxiety and no dizziness. Bingo. Exactly. And Janice, so good to see that you're doing well. That is awesome. It's just awesome to hear that. Okay, so Joella, you have to tell us where you're moving if you can, because that's That's crazy. I just think of you as a Utah person. What am I gonna do if you're not a Utah person anymore? Okay, so Jill is here, and Jill, just special shout out to Jill. Jill has been a YouTube viewer for a long time. I feel like Jill and I have a history, and it's so awesome to finally have you in the membership community. I'm just so glad you decided to join, and I hope you're finding lots of love and support here. It's just special. This place is pretty great. So she's asking, why does weather affect my PPPD symptoms? And it's summer here in Australia. I know we're all jealous now, and very hot. I'm finding it really bothers me. Okay, have a video about this. So I'm going to link to it in the comment section. Since you are in Australia, Jill, I imagine you are not watching this live. So I'm going to put it in the chat. If you're watching this on the YouTube app or on a desktop, you will see the chat. If you click live chat, you'll be able to see kind of the live chat. So here, let me pop that in the chat. But just in case you don't see it, I'm going to also just post it in response here, answered. And here's a link to a video in which I talk about it. Okay, so there we go. So long story short, and again, in the video, I go into a little more depth, but for those of you also wondering, um, yeah. So in the video, I basically say that heat is a stimulus, it's a stressor. Um, I think probably the simplest way to think about this, Jill, would be using the stress bucket metaphor. So with the stress bucket metaphor, the idea being that all of the little stressors in your life just are kind of cumulative. And then if your bucket's already full and you're dizzy, which also adds more to your bucket, of course, even little stressors like heat are going to throw you over the edge. You're going to go into fight or flight mode. So that's probably the simplest way to think about it. But what it really comes down to is that your brain is misinterpreting heat as a contributor to danger. And I mean, in a sense, it's right. Too much heat really can be dangerous, but most importantly, heat is something it needs to adapt to. It's a stressor that could potentially be dangerous if it doesn't adapt. And when your capacity is already completely full, you're not going to respond well. Your body is going to respond with fight or flight. So it is actually very, very common that you are what you're experiencing, the heat. It doesn't mean it's not neural circuit dizziness. It just means that your brain is extra sensitive to stressors right now. Okay, so Joella says she's moving to South Carolina. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a beautiful area. So, I mean, makes it you'll be closer to my neck of the woods. I don't know. Do we have anyone else here who's in South Carolina? I know we've got some in North Carolina, but okay. Anyway, so Brenda, moving on to Brenda's question. Brenda's enjoying working with her AEDP counselor, and she's discovered in working with him that she has underlying sadness related to immigration because she immigrated to the United States from the UK in 1979. Brenda says, I know you have said that immigrants are overrepresented in your work, and I wonder if there could be any value in a subset of immigrants talking together. I love that idea. Um, I don't know in the chat off the top of my head how many of you guys are immigrants. We do have immigrants in our community. I don't know if it was just overrepresented among my clients or I was just kind of noticing it more, but I think it makes sense to me that immigrants might be overrepresented because can you think of a stressor greater than moving to another country and having to figure out a new culture, especially as an adult? And I will say, it's funny, Brenda, when I was in the UK in November, in the UK, they speak my language. So I know you obviously the move to the US is very, very parallel process here. The language is the same, albeit with interesting accents that I had trouble understanding sometimes. Um, a lot of cultural similarities. It was still different enough that I felt like a dummy. And I wasn't like consciously saying to myself, wow, Yoni, you suck. I just noticed it just would take me longer to understand what people were saying to me. And it felt kind of embarrassing because I always was like, am I doing something that's like weirdly against social norms? Like I had to kind of be on guard more and just multiply that by millions of instances when you're actually an immigrant. And it makes sense again why someone's stress bucket might be full. So just, um, yeah, just again, thinking about that. And if we wanna start a group, I mean, I just need to hear from more of you so that I know, like, who to invite to said group. So, Brenda, if you have others who want to join, you guys can message Brenda. So, Brenda Clarkson with a C. You can message her or you can respond to her post here and just comment. And then, Brenda, you can let me know, and I will open a private group for people who are either from immigrant families or who are immigrants themselves. Okay, so moving on to Charlotte's question. She's dealing with the dip, the anxiety still high, dizziness is a little lower. Is it okay to make a story? Yeah, with the sensations. Like, for example, can I imagine myself windsurfing on a tropical place? Would it be similar to somatic tracking? Or will I start associating windsurfing with dizziness in the future? No, you're overthinking it. No, don't worry about it. I love that idea, especially if it's something playful. If you connect a sensation that normally is unpleasant to something pleasant, that's somatic tracking essentially, and it's actually incredibly helpful. I think that this is why people sometimes will stop using the word dizziness and start calling their sensations the wobbles, because it just has more of a playful sound to it, a more playful feel to it. You can totally do that. And I've had people say they started to imagine like being rocked to sleep, and that made them feel that their sensations were comforting. Or I've had people like go after this with self-hypnosis. So by the way, self-hypnosis, there are free apps out there that can teach you how to do self-hypnosis. You can connect a specific trigger to a particular outcome that you want. And it's not as simple as, oh, how about my dizziness just makes me joyful all the time? It's not that simple, but you can connect a particular sensation sometimes to bring on a certain outcome. So for example, people with tinnitus will sometimes use their tinnitus as a trigger to induce deep restfulness when they start listening to it when they're going to sleep. People can sometimes use a spouse snoring as a trigger to go into a deeper and deeper sleep. So just again, totally, totally fine to do that. Okay. Um, do I have tips on feeling more grounded in bed? I have trouble sleeping as I feel I'm floating or spinning when I'm in bed. Yeah. Actually, what I was going to suggest was a weighted blanket. That really helps, and firmer surfaces are going to help too. So, if you have like a pillow top for a relatively soft bed, oops, grounded in bed here. Let's try this. Um, that might help. But weighted blankets have been quite popular here in the community, so that's an option too. And then visual moving things bother me a lot now. Would you recommend starting the card exercises? I've never done those, but I'm still high in stress mode. Better to wait. So Charlotte, I usually have really good memories for these things, but I can't remember if you've already if there was a vestibular injury and you haven't done the card exercises yet, then yes. If there wasn't a vestibular injury and your ears are fine and they've done the tests and there's really no issue, then don't over focus on the symptoms by using the card exercises. So that's my suggestion. You're going to see symptoms change. Symptoms are going to do this. And the more that you focus on the symptoms themselves and try to get rid of particular symptoms when they do and react to them, the more they like to stick around because they're being fed and fueled by fear. The exception, of course, just being when there is actually a vestibular problem that started this thing off. And if you have not done VRT, you should be doing VRT. But again, if there wasn't a vestibular problem, then mm, there's, I don't suggest doing them. Okay. So, okay. So Sarah is here, and Sarah, so we have bunch of Sarah. So I'm going to say Sarah C. So Sarah C is back. She says she had several months of no symptoms, and she was dealing with health anxiety and major stress for the gallbladder surgery, and the gallbladder surgery kind of kept her occupied, she said. And the dizziness then came back now that the gallbladder surgery is over with and things have settled back down. The dizziness came back. So to me, Sarah, what I'm hearing is the first of all, I'm sorry, before I say what I was gonna say and just start answering your question, I'm sorry. I don't like seeing people here. Like, I do, but I don't, right? Like, I love seeing you guys. I'm glad I can help you. I'm sorry you have to be here again. Um, this is the stuff that I'm talking about just for anyone listening who's so Sarah, this isn't I this is not your fault, and I'm gonna explain why it's not your fault in a second, but this is why I have that video on why symptoms come back because there are certain patterns that I've noticed in people who come back, and people who don't. And some people like Mark H, who is may or may not be in the chat. Yes, Mark Hines is in the chat. Uh, so people like Mark, some of us just come back because we like it. But some people come back because they have to because they feel like they're not feeling well. To me, it seems like one of the big differences is that especially if someone started with major health anxiety type stuff, um, and the health anxiety just attached to something different, inevitably, if the health anxiety is still there and they haven't really dealt with that, then they might come back because the health anxiety can attach to dizziness again. Because as we've talked about, dizziness sensations are going to happen sometimes. So if the health anxiety is still kind of looking for problems, which it does, I mean that's its job to look for problems and to tell you that there's something wrong with you, then eventually it's going to latch back onto the dizziness and you're going to end up being distressed by the dizziness again. So Sarah, we've talked about there's always stress. I know you've done a lot of deconstructing of your internal world and a lot of the stress. And one thing that I don't know that we've talked about, and that I just want to suggest to you, sometimes when people say health anxiety, what they're actually describing is obsessive compulsive disorder. And I don't pathologize anyone and I'm not saying, "Oh, well, you must have OCD." I want to put that term out there for those of you with health anxiety because it can be really, really helpful in charting a path forward. Now, even if you don't have obsessive compulsive disorder, but you have like kind of an obsessive compulsive disorder type pattern around health specifically, the way that you work with health anxiety is a little bit and OCD type stuff is a little different from how you work with neural circuit dizziness. And I talked about this yesterday in the uh, in the meeting that we did in the coaching meeting. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on it right now, but needless to say, um, just digging into emotions and trying to feel the feelings and, like, kind of deconstruct things, that's not that's part of it, that's a huge part of it, and I'm so glad you've already done that work, Sarah, but if it's not impacting the health anxiety, like, if that's still there, then we've still got a problem because it can attach to a different sensation, and you're gonna be living with that. So, of course, very unfortunately for you, you also actually had a major health scare, like, that was legit, so the health anxiety is gonna come back even more forcefully. So, I would very strongly suggest just kind of learning a little bit about obsessive compulsive disorder, not saying, Sarah, you have it, but you can kind of think of health anxiety as a mini form, like a miniature form of obsessive compulsive disorder, and working with health anxiety needs to be a little bit more, um, a little bit heavier on the exposure and a little bit lighter on the reassurance than typical neural circuit dizziness stuff. Reassurance when someone has OCD type stuff like health anxiety, like miniature OCD, reassurance can actually be part of the anxiety, it can be part of a compulsion. And then it's not helpful. It actually fuels the obsession. And again, I am not a mental health professional, and this is again beyond the scope of this Q&A. But those are kind of the thoughts that are coming to mind. And please forgive me, Sarah. I'm not implying, oh, you have OCD, and that's why. No, I'm just saying, hey, if this health anxiety is really bothering you, and it's just latching on to various things, then we need to treat it kind of as its own thing, and not focus on the neural circuit dizziness as much. Focus on the health anxiety itself because that's really where the problem is right now. Okay. And again, I'll probably have more content about this. I feel like I'm probably due for more content on OCD specifically. I just really want to find a therapist who practices the kind of exposure work that I feel is like in line with the work that I do. And there aren't many of them out there because a lot of exposure work around OCD is very harsh and very abrupt. And it's again, it just doesn't sit right with me. And I've noticed with my clients who have neural circuit dizziness and obsessive compulsive disorder or obsessive compulsive tendencies, it's just too harsh. It's just too much because they're also dealing with all this dysregulation from neural circuit dizziness. So a gentler, kind of more compassionate approach is necessary, but there is a difference between that and just working with neural circuit dizziness. Okay, again, let's just to wrap this up before I go on to Bettina's question. For those of you who have health anxiety that only started with the neural circuit dizziness, do not worry. Just keep going. Okay. You're doing everything right. For those of you who have long standing health anxiety, and this is just the latest manifestation of it, there may be some differences in how you handle it. Okay. So on to Bettina. I have a question regarding emotions. I've always been a very emotional person. And as now I'm starting to feel better, I find myself laughing more and being overall happier. As I am now starting to get excited about the little things again, my mom keeps telling me not to be overly emotional. Oh my gosh. I hate when people say stuff like this. Okay. When I feel happy, because that wouldn't be good for my nervous system. The same goes for when I'm feeling sad. My question is this correct? And if so, how should I aim to try and express my emotions in a way that wouldn't be burdensome for my nervous system? Thank you in advance. Oh, Bettina, I am so sorry. That is just I know your mom is doing this out of just so much love and worry and care for you. Okay? I know that's where it's coming from, but it is just not right. It's not correct. Um, y- y- your nervous system is not weak. Your nervous system is not weak. Um, your job in neural circuit dizziness recovery is to build nervous system resilience. So it's not a matter of am I burdening my nervous system? It's a matter of like how much capacity does my nervous system have and how can I continue to increase its capacity? And what you're discussing, feeling more emotions on both ends, both the positive and the negative, is increasing your capacity to feel. It's increasing your nervous system's bucket. It's increasing the stress bucket. It's increasing your nervous system's capacity, not the opposite. So it's not burdensome. It's helpful. You should stretch those feelings. You should feel them. You should be able to feel them fully. You should then have a wider range of experiences available to you. The problem is actually when people start to view feelings as burdensome, whether positive or negative, that they have all this extra pressure on their nervous system to try to keep it down because emotions are natural, they happen without intention, they just happen. It takes a lot of energy out of your nervous system. It's burdensome on your nervous system to suppress emotions. So you are not going to hurt yourself by being excited and happy. You're going to hurt yourself by trying to suppress emotions that are naturally arising. Let your nervous system know that emotions are fine. Okay? I hope that that was clear. Um okay. So now a question from Sarah V. Um okay. Um Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. My computer is being really weird. Give me just a second. I'm gonna unplug my thing. Just one second. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'm back. I'm so sorry about that. I think now I there was something up with my computer and everything seems to be working fine now. It just completely froze and my screen went black, but I'm back now. If someone could just comment in the chat, just give me a thumbs up or let me know you can see me. That would be great, just so I'm feeling more peaceful. Um, Okay. So, yeah, so Sarah's question, Sarah V. On to Sarah V's question. Okay. So Sarah says, most of my symptoms are internal feelings of being pulled, swaying, bobbing. When my eyes are closed, very slow movements make them worse. Are there any ways to engage my other senses to start working harder? Or do you think the brain will figure it out on its own just as quickly? Can practicing sitting and standing up, or simply just standing with my eyes closed, help speed things up a bit with these internal sensations? Interesting question. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, yeah, you can see me. Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm getting all these thumbs up and highs. Okay, good. It's good. You're alive out there. It's good. Okay. Sorry about that technical issue earlier, but now my camera seems to be working better too. So I don't know what was going on. So, yes, when it comes to internal sensations, so I really, I feel like balance is something all of us should be working on. My only concern is when someone is very stressed and very anxious, and there are all these intrusive thoughts about the sensations. And then when I say, yeah, go ahead and practice balance, it becomes kind of part of this giant project, this giant recovery project. And then it just increases like, oh, did it work? Did it work? Are my sensations getting worse? Are they sensations getting better? Like it can add a lot of extra pressure and stress. That's not helpful. So my suggestion is with this, um, everyone should be working on balance. Standing with your eyes closed, standing on one leg, moving your head while you stand on one leg. I do balance stuff as part of my workout routine because we should all be doing balance stuff as part of our workout routines or daily lives. And I don't do a lot of balancing in my daily life because I sit at a computer a lot. So all of us should be doing that. So, Sarah, by all means, do that. Um, just try to have outcome independence about whether this is going to be directly affecting your sensations initially or not. Is it going to hurt to pull your other senses in on this project? No. Let's give you as many resources as we possibly can. Let's let's give your brain as much information as we possibly can, but we don't want to do it in a fear-based way. So by all means try it, but again, try not to get too attached to the outcome. Okay. So a question from Rohan. Okay. Yeah. Oh, this is a great question, Ron. Thank you so much for this one. Okay. Question about somatic tracking. And just so everyone knows, I have this video I recorded on somatic tracking. It was like, I mean, I think it was 2 months ago now. I just haven't had a chance to edit it. I've had all this other stuff coming out. So I will get there. And I think I talk about this in that video as well. Maybe I don't. So I will answer it either way. But just so you know, I'm aware that there are some questions people have about somatic tracking that are really good. So he says he understands what somatic tracking is doing. I'm not clear how to respond when a symptom suddenly appears and the first natural reaction is fear. Um, when this happens involuntarily, the mind is generally racing with fearful thoughts at this time, and one can feel strong emotions of fear. Does one forcefully introduce a message of safety into the mind to block the chain of thoughts and at the same time make room to experience the emotions? If not, what is right strategy? That what you just described, I loved. So okay, first of all, A, the intrusive thoughts, B, the strong emotions of fear. You cannot stop those. Okay. Think of them like a brain glitch. Okay. It's an automatic brain glitch. It's neurological. It is a neurological response for you to have fear in response to a new sensation. Okay. So no blame, no shame in that. You're gonna have that. The magic occurs in the reactions you have to the initial reactions. So your meta reaction, as it were. So if your initial reaction is fear, as you say, Rohan, again, that's normal. Your your job is twofold. A, to do your best to make yourself feel safe, and B, to make space for your emotions. And that may seem like it contradicts itself, but it's actually the same thing as far as I'm concerned. So let me explain. So you say message of safety to the brain and at the same time makes room to experience the emotions. That's one way it can look. So it could look like I remember I'm safe, everything's okay, hand on my heart, I'm here for myself. Deep breath, it's okay. And I'm sorry that you were scared, making space for the emotions. Okay. I would argue that by really making space for the emotions, you're also sending a message of safety. So, not to say that you shouldn't send an additional message of safety, like we just described. I'm safe or it's okay. I know this is just neural circuit dizziness. I know the sensation can't hurt me. Again, those are fine. But the big message of safety is when you make space for your fear and you don't become it. Okay. So, what I mean by that is immediately getting into observer stance. I had a reaction of fear that already separates you. It's not like I'm full of fear. Oh my gosh, meltdown. You say, oh, my body and my brain and every bit of my cells just responded with fear, but that is not all of you. Okay. And I know this is getting already a little bit philosophical, but arguably your consciousness is not just your physical body. Okay. I don't know. Some of you may disagree with me and please forgive me. I'm not trying to get mystical here, but even if every inch of you is screaming, "Oh my gosh, I just had this horrible, scary experience," you're still able to observe that every inch of you is having this scary experience, which implies that there's at least a piece of you that is not that scary experience. So again, it can be as simple as just restating it. And the way that I like to state it is there is a part of me, or there is a very big part of me holding fear, or holding a giant amount of fear over what just happened. And I'm here and I'm making space for that. And it's not all that I am. And I'm here for it. Okay. That to me, that's both a message of safety and making space for the emotions. But you can totally do it the way you described, Rohan. That's fine too. Either one is fine. Yeah. So Mark says, dive into the feeling. Yeah. That Mark, I just remember Mark's interview. It's just one of my favorite. It's not an exact quote, but I've said this so many times. Mark was describing how he was walking. I think you were walking through downtown, Mark, and you said something like, I had this realization that these sensations were exactly what my brain needed in order to heal. That's another huge message of safety. So that's another one you can throw in there too, Rohan. The fear doesn't negate the fact that the sensations are your own medicine. Yeah. And Krista's here. Hello. Hello. And Mark says, I think I'd rather say it is breathe into the feeling. Yeah. If you can, which I know is not always so easy. Not always so easy, but if you can. It's okay to say, I can't dive into this thing, but I can at least not be it. That's already like a huge help, I think. Okay. So triggering situations and symptoms. Okay. So Melanie says, I've been in some very triggering situations these past few weeks, so emotionally, she says, and I feel I've been handling them so well compared to a few months ago, but I'm still having such debilitating dizziness after these events, even though I truly feel fine emotionally. Why is that? Couple of options. So, Melanie, what I have found through my own work is that it's like an onion, a never ending onion. And every time I think, wow, I've got this, I like totally understand, I get to another level deeper. And then I get to another level deeper than that. And it feels like the more I know, the less I know. That's I've been having that experience in every aspect of my life lately, especially, believe it or not, in dizziness. The more I learn, the more I'm like, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. I I it's just bizarre because I'm like, I don't know less than I did 5 years ago, but I feel like I know infinitely less. So my point simply, Melanie, is that one possibility here is that you're on kind of you're in the onion, but you're not at the levels of the onion that are dealing with these triggering emotional situations yet. It's one possibility. The other possibility is it's an association. So your brain is still associating those situations with danger, even though you're not emotionally triggered as much. Your brain's still like, yeah, I know you're not emotionally triggered as much, but those situations are still dangerous. So that could either be the situation itself, your brain just interpreting as dangerous. It's just, oh, yeah, we know the situation is dangerous. It's always dangerous, even though it doesn't feel that way to you anymore. Or an emotion itself. Your brain can respond to the emotion itself and think that the emotion itself is dangerous, even when you're okay with it now. So that's a process of exposure. And um, not just exposure, but exposure in a new way. So um, that's one I think thing I really wanted to. Okay, actually, this is the perfect time for me to read this quote to you. If I can, darn it, there. Hang on, I have a quote I wanted to read. Okay, I think this will help you, Melanie. It's not like super duper exactly what I like related to what I was just saying, but this is, I think, what I'm trying to get to. Okay. So this is a quote from David Eagleman. I'm going to post this in the community too. He's a neuroscientist. He says, as you grow older, your brain is able to keep rewiring all the time. And so we have this impression that the flexibility of the brain decreases as you get older. But in fact, it's just because your brain's job is just to figure out how to get by in the world and do a good job in the world. And once you figured most things out, like, oh, these are different kinds of personalities, and this is how I needed to do something at work, and this is how I use email and phone and whatever, then your brain does less changing, only because it has successfully done its job and it doesn't need to keep changing. The brain changes when there's surprise, when there's something that happened that it wasn't expecting. Then it changes up. So you still have plenty of plasticity even when you're 90 years old. It's just that most people aren't using it at that point because they say, oh, I got it. I know how things work. So my point here, Melanie, is if even though you feel differently on the inside about these emotionally triggering situations, your brain is still reading them as the same pattern because the pattern is the same from its perspective. There's not been enough change in the pattern for it to say, "Oh, actually, this is totally different." So that's why um, sometimes having these big, powerful emotional experiences produce such a big change because the brain's like, "Whoa, that was crazy. Okay, we got to figure out what happened there so we can make new predictions." And also why um, when people have kind of long-standing patterns in their relationships that have become so automatic, we want to look a little more closely at those automatic patterns and see if there's something bigger that needs to be changed because that kind of change is the type of thing that tells the brain, "Whoa, hang on a second, this truly is different." So I'm not saying that that occurred in your case or that you need to change anything really big. I'm just saying that um, this is something to think about that if you're still repeating the same patterns, even though you feel a little differently, that's not going to be enough to change your brain's associations. That was my point. Okay. So Brianna asks, what do you call it when you start to have really good days, and then you have dips? So she says really bad symptoms worse than baseline. Um, this is sounds good to me. I actually think this is what I see. Uh, this is a pattern I see a lot during recovery. First of all, I'm not questioning whether the dips are actually way worse than baseline or not. I just know that they're always miserable to people. We've all kind of brainstormed about this and wondered, "Hey, is it really that it's worse, or is it just that it feels so much worse because you just had a great day?" And no one knows the answer because these questions are subjective. So, I mean, these symptoms are subjective, so no one knows for sure. But what I can tell you, Brianna, is that when someone starts to have really, really good days and then you have dips, that's what I would call expected recovery pattern. And again, not to say that I like that that happens, but please try the take home message here. Please try to view those bad days as opportunities. And this is what I said in that recent video on symptom drift. If you haven't seen it, Brianna, I really suggest you see it. It's about symptoms changing. So it's not about dips specifically, but I say something really I think important at the end of the video. You guys can tell me if it was important or not. But at the very end of the video, I say that your symptom changes offer you an opportunity to lose your fear of the symptoms coming back or changing once and for all. And so you that is the time when the most powerful rewiring happens. Again, just like I was talking about with Melanie earlier, the biggest changes happen when your brain is surprised by how you react or surprised by something that happens. So if you have a dip and you surprise your brain by reacting totally differently from the way that it expects you to react, that's going to produce more change. And by the way, surprise doesn't have to be, "Oh, I'm so excited, yay, dip," but more like, "Okay, well, in previous dips, I would react by freaking out and Googling. And this dip, I'm just going to kind of take it easy and take care of myself and know everything's going to be fine." That's a huge change. And your brain could be surprised by that and produce plasticity. All right. So, question from Charlotte about flickering lights. Hmm. Yeah, this is a thing. I'm having trouble with flickering Christmas lights or candles. Visual moving stuff bothers me a lot lately. With Christmas around the corner, do you have any tips on how to handle them? Um, yeah, that is really tough, and I don't have magical solutions for you. The best one that I can think of off the top of my head is to use peripheral vision. So if you're looking at something and something's flickering, to kind of focus your attention on what's going on at the periphery of your eyes. So I have a video on this in the membership community under Tools for Tough Times. So if you go to the side of the community under the course, and there's the Healing Chronic Dizziness course, but also there is Tools for Tough Times. And in Tough Times, I have hang on, where is it? Tools for Tough Times. There it is. So under Tools for Tough Times, you'll see the 5 Ps, and one of the 5 Ps is peripheral vision. So I just have a little informative video on how to do peripheral vision. That works pretty well with lights, but again, it's if your brain is sensitive to those things, it's sensitive to those things, and there's not a lot we can do to mitigate that particular symptom in the moment, unfortunately. I again, other tips, more light in the room to contrast with it. So kind of like candle in a dark room, the candle's really obvious and it's really drawing your attention and it's really drawing your eyes' attention. Whereas if you have a very bright light in the room and there's a candle, it's a lot less of a contrast. That might be another thing. So if you have a Christmas tree or you have candles lit, having lights on at the same time, that's going to be a little easier on you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Toby says she's dealt with what Brianna's dealt with. She says, um, "Oh, I was trying to put that on the screen." Toby says, "I had a thought. Hey, I've turned a corner after feeling better." And then my brain was like, "Nope, not turning any corners. Here's a symptom." Yeah, and this is the nature of recovery. I mean, I've tried to normalize this because I know in the success stories, you just don't hear about this as much. I've tried to ask people a lot more about their dips now. But we're talking to each other for an hour and 20 minutes. So like usually what people are eager to share is the lessons they've learned, the things that they figured out, how they cope with things now. And sometimes we don't really spend as much time on what it's like to have this up and down process, but it really is a normal process. Okay. So Ashley has a couple questions here. Okay. So Ashley's question is, how can I progress if the body's natural reaction to an odd sensation is instinctive bracing and panic? So, for that question, Ashley, I'm going to refer you back to Rohan's question about somatic tracking because that was, I think that is the correct way to handle it. So, I think you might be here in the chat. I don't remember, Ashley, if you were here today. Are you here? Have I seen? Yes, Ashley's here. Hey, Ashley. So you heard me talk about it already. Cool. Okay. So I'm switching to question number 2 because I think I answered basically the answer to that question in the question that Rohan asked. So, question 2, maybe it's just because over time our nervous system is getting more calm. Why are my symptoms non-existent 1 minute, and super crazy the next, and then gone again 5 minutes later? So, random and sporadic dizziness. If this is stress related, why does that happen? Okay, so this is something super important, and I need to clarify this in a video because I get across this question a lot. So, sporadic. So first, Ashley, let me just reassure you, what you're experiencing is definitely improvement. That is good. It's good. It's a good sign. But the sporadic symptoms, so stress and symptoms are very related, but not always necessarily related in time. So there's think about it. The way that I like to think about it is stress um, produces rewiring stuff in your vestibular system, and it can produce physiologic changes in your vestibular system too that have consequences down the line but may not have consequences in the moment. So you might have a really bad year and not have symptoms, and then have symptoms that come and go throughout the day just based on little biological or physiological factors. It's caused by stress, but the stress isn't happening necessarily at the time of the symptoms. And by the way, this changes per person, right? Different people have different responses to this. Some people notice an immediate change in symptoms with anxiety or with stress, and some people don't. More often than not, especially with dizziness, what I notice is there isn't a direct time correlation. So, um, the way that I like to think about it is if the circuit was kind of developed during a time of stress, little things can set it off without you necessarily being like obviously stressed out. Those things may be little innocuous stressors, like you had like a hormone that signaled to your brain that you ate 3 hours ago. It can be your brain can interpret any kind of little stressor that you may or may not be aware of as potentially dangerous and then activate the neural circuit. I think that's probably the way to think about it. I don't know that that's like exactly physiologically accurate, but I think that's the way to think about it. Um, also, I think this probably also relates to some of the stuff going on in our unconscious minds. So just because on the outside we're perfectly fine doesn't mean that there isn't some processing going on about something else that is very emotionally distressing to us at the same time. So I don't think we always know what programs we're running. So what looks stressful on the outside really isn't always a good indicator of what's really stressful, which I know can be very frustrating to people. You're not missing anything. This is just how recovery goes. Um, Random and sporadic dizziness is likely, Ashley, um, being triggered by stressors that are not in your conscious mind. And that may be unconscious beliefs, feelings, thoughts, or it might be unconscious sensations from your body, like signals from your body that you have no control over. So, my suggestion is to keep doing what you're doing because clearly it's working and to give it time, which I know is not a great thing to hear when you're dealing with this. But I hope that it sounded like it was more of an information question than it was an I'm in a horrible, deep distress question. So, please let me know if I read that wrong. As far as the timeline goes, Ashley, I am not gonna be able to answer this one. So, um, I'm gonna answer it obviously, but I'm not gonna be able to give you the kind of answer you want. Let's put it that way. So, she's done a lot of work on my boundaries. My life has gotten exponentially better in the last 3 months or so. I know the nervous system needs time. You can't just turn off symptoms, but if you had to say what is the average, Sam said her recovery took almost 2 years. Yeah, she's curious. Okay, so actually, all right. So it's just that there's been such a variation in this. Um, what I'm really looking for is improvement in people, and usually people improve relatively quickly when they're on the right track. So within the first few months, people have a pretty significant improvement typically. Now, does that mean that they feel good and that they don't have symptoms? No, it doesn't mean that. I think for a lot of people that process takes quite a bit longer, and I don't think that a year or more is out of the realm of normal for people. Um, you have to keep in mind too, I started my YouTube channel in 2021. It's the end of 2023. So it's my YouTube channel's been around for 2.5 years. And before that, I was working in the clinic with all sorts of different people. Um, but I didn't have the kind of sample size that I have now. So thinking back on my in-person clients, it was months typically for people to get significantly better and, like, not need to work with me anymore. It was usually months. Um, a year was I can think of a few where it was a year. But again, now my sample size is a lot bigger, and I see a bigger variation than that because I'm seeing a much wider variety of people. So, what I really look for is the improvement. I think for most people, it can be as quick as 1 week, or it can take multiple years for people to get better. I think that that's both of those are reasonable. So, I feel like that is, like, not a helpful answer to that question. But I that's kind of my assessment of it right now, because that's what I see both here and in the in-person work that I've done, that it can take quite a bit longer. So Sam took 2 years, and I emphasize that because I wanted people to see that that totally does happen sometimes. So, I don't and again, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh my god, I can't deal with this for 2 more years." You wanna keep in mind there is steady improvement at some point, and people also start living their lives better and they feel better. And so, yeah, they don't feel 100% necessarily for the entire period of time, but things are getting incrementally better all the time. So they're not living in complete misery for the whole time it takes until the symptoms are gone. And then you see people like Sam, like Whitney, like Vivian, by the way, is fully recovered. She and I have to have a recovery. We're going to have a second recovery story, so that you guys can hear how it went and see 1 year later after we did our first interview. Um, like Julie, like Anna, like they don't have symptoms at all. And at some point I think what happened with Anna was she said, at some point I just realized my symptoms were gone and I didn't even realize when they had left. So I am being honest when I say it can take a long period of time, but not all that time is spent in misery. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and, as Marianne's pointing out, she's had this for a while, and, a lot of people have had this for 20 years or longer, but keep in mind they haven't necessarily come across the idea that they can actually get better. So there is I would say from the point that someone realizes, "Oh, I can get better," and starts doing the work, that process can last a while for some people. And I can't again, I've had all sorts of thoughts about what predicts who gets better when. Clearly, past anxiety and trauma have a lot to do with it, but that's not all. I've seen people with a lot of trauma get better very quickly. There's something about someone's social connections now, um, someone's support system in general, the kinds of messages they got from the doctors when it first happened, how traumatic that first experience was. Those things also really seem to play a role as well. And people who have really, really unsupportive spouses now and are living lives that are very uncomfortable, even if they didn't have a ton of trauma, they're going to have a hard time getting better. So those are factors that really matter here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the timeline starts Michael, thanks for asking this. Are we saying this timeline started from actual beginning of Dizzy or time we started addressing and learning once we found you? Yeah, I would say the timeline starts from when we started addressing and learning, and also if we're doing the correct addressing. Now, obviously, some people don't do any addressing and they just get better too. So I'm not saying you have to fully and perfectly address everything, but I mean, Sam is someone um, who was very familiar with this work because she had recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome using a lot of the same principles, and it still took her time. So again, really just without putting pressure on yourself, without saying to yourself, oh my gosh, you're saying that I'm going to be miserable for years now. No, I'm not saying you're going to be miserable for years. I'm saying that sensation free and living like the life that you want to live, um, there's a different timeline for each person on that. And for some people it's a week and some people it's longer. So just try to do the best you can with what you're doing right now. You're gonna get there. It's gonna be okay. You're gonna get there. It does take time for some people. Okay. Um, and Sarah C had a second question about living life. So Sarah, C, my answer to your previous question about I mean, you can just live your life. Um, and I think that's an excellent strategy in general for you. But I I really think you wanna directly address this health anxiety. As long as the health anxiety or this miniature OCD thing is happening, and I'm just calling it that just for clarity since I talked about it that way before, then I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you because the dizziness is dysregulating enough to keep you occupied for a long time, and the health anxiety is just gonna keep attaching to it. I've seen this with clients, and it's very difficult. So yes, please just live your life, ignore the symptoms. You're going to be fine. But it's also time to pause and say, hey, like, is this the kind of life I want to live? Like, constantly trying to bat away this health anxiety that's constantly attaching to various things in my life. Okay. So, okay. So, Allie is asking, so Allie's a new member. Hello, Allie. So, Allie is asking if palatal myoclonus is from NCD. So, if I'm not mistaken, that is vibrating in the palate, right? Let me make sure that I'm right. So, just so we're clear, my, I was trained. My undergrad was in audiology as well, and we did learn some stuff about speech pathology, but this is a little outside of my area of expertise. Yeah, it is rhythmic jerking movements of the soft palate. Okay, cool. So I was right. Woohoo. Okay. So you're asking if that could be from neural circuit dizziness. The only thing to make these spasms and popping stop is to have Botox injections or the neck or take medicine. Ooh, okay. Okay. So I this is one of those that there's some nuance here. Okay. So things if this happened in isolation and there was indication that you had damage to nerves and that was what was causing it, then it's not neural circuit dizziness. It's caused by physical damage. And in that case, Botox injections or taking medication would be necessary. And again, this is outside of my wheelhouse a bit, so I can't tell you for sure how people diagnose palatal myoclonus. It says it's usually due to lesions in the brain nerve pathways, and it's usually from stroke. And Allie, I have no idea if you've had stroke or not, but most people in this community have not. So I'm making an assumption that in general, if someone's having some of this fluttering or vibration or jerking movements in the soft palate, that it's not because of known nerve injury, it's idiopathic, aka we don't know why it's happening. And when I hear something like that and it's occurring in conjunction with neural circuit dizziness and other symptoms that seem to be unrelated but are diffuse and all related to this circuit being driven by fight or flight, then I would be very inclined to think of this particular symptom as yet another component of the neural circuit range of symptoms. So to me, the question that I would ask my doctor would be, is there physical tissue damage that explains why I have this symptom, or is it idiopathic? Like you don't really know why. And is the onset of this symptom related in time to onset of a whole bunch of other symptoms that don't seem to be related? Those would be two indications that this is just part of the neural circuit range of symptoms. I can't tell you for sure, but can tell you that I have seen all sorts of tremors and all sorts of spasms and all sorts of tightness and cracking and popping and eyelid twitching and ear crackling and um, eustachian tube problems. I've seen all of that with neural circuit dizziness, and it was all just totally a neural circuit issue. So, although the soft palate is not my area of expertise, uh, it wouldn't surprise me if it followed that same pattern. Okay. So I hope that that helps. Although I can't definitively answer it. To me, those are the things that would make me suspect it's just a neural circuit problem. Okay. So this is an amazing question from Charlene. Charlene, you always ask such great questions. And it's good to see you too. I feel like I haven't seen you for a while either. Um, and then I'm going to come back to the chat because I see I have some questions or some comments in there. So Charlene says, I'm starting a medication that has a possible side effect of dizziness. I'm curious about dizziness related to medications. Um, and is it possible to use the same techniques that we use for chronic dizziness to avoid these side effects? Uh, this medicine is a heart medication. Thank you. Oh, wow. I love this question. Okay, I've never been asked this before. You guys always come up. I don't think I've ever been asked half the questions in this Q&A before. So really, really good questions. Okay. So I feel like every medication has the side effect of dizziness. And I think that first of all, dizziness related to the heart feels very different from dizziness related to the ears. It's usually kind of more of a lightheaded than it is a dizzy. So dizziness is a very, very broad term, as many of you know. Uh, we really try to hone in on it when we talk to people, but vestibular related dizziness has a very different quality typically than heart related dizziness. So not to say that this medication is going to cause heart related dizziness sensation, but it is quite likely to me, Charlene, that even if that symptom showed up, it's going to be distinct enough from the neural circuit dizziness that you're going to be like, yeah, that I know what that is. Because I've seen people have that. I've seen people have neural circuit dizziness and then have some kind of medical procedure and then be able to differentiate and say, yeah, that wasn't the same kind of dizziness. That was totally from the medication. I know what that was. So, not saying that everyone has that palate and is able to distinguish between them, but I think it's possible that that could happen. Dizziness is a common enough sensation that it's going to be listed as a side effect of pretty much every medication because 1 in 4 adults in the United States has an episode of dizziness every year. So if you think of the people they test these medications on, a quarter of them are going to have dizziness with or without the medication, and it's always going to be listed as a side effect. So whether it's actually going to cause that side effect for you, no one knows. But that said, you can arm yourself, first of all, with those two things that I just told you, but you can also arm yourself with the knowledge that there is a mind body connection and your response to symptoms is not purely physiological, it's also psychological. So by saying to yourself, hey, I already know what to do with dizziness, um, somatic tracking any sensations you get, that is going to affect the symptoms, even when they're being caused by a medical change, because it is not look, when dizziness has a purely physiological cause, it's completely physiological, then those things aren't going to have a huge effect on it. But in most cases, physical symptoms are mixed. They both have a physiological component and a like neural circuit processing component. So you can affect that processing component by yes, practicing these same kind of techniques. So I hope that makes sense. Again, chances are it's not even going to be a problem. Um, but if it is, then you can practice these same techniques with it. I have seen, I will say not with heart medications, but I've seen with psychiatric medications, like things that directly affect brain chemistry. For those types of things, sometimes it does make symptoms feel aggravated. And in that case, it's a physiologic stressor that's kind of sending the neural circuit into more overdrive. So in that case, what has happened with my clients is they've had to switch medications. So just kind of putting that out there, just so you know, you're not trapped taking this particular medication. There may be options. There may be other options that your doctor can offer you if it is a problem. Okay. So Amy's question, speaking to the issue of motion sickness and history of sensitive vestibular issues. Yeah. So motion sickness is basically everyone's brain has a certain level of sensitivity to contradicting information from your vestibular system and the other senses involved in the balance system. Those of us with histories of motion sickness tend to have brains that are just a little more sensitive to those kinds of changes. So you are more prone to neural circuit dizziness if you have motion sickness, and neural circuit dizziness makes you more prone to motion sickness. However, I have seen the opposite be true as well, Amy. I've seen people who have neural circuit dizziness suddenly not have motion sickness anymore because their brains are done interpreting long distances or short distances as problems anymore. So I'd like to be able to drive again and not have crazy sensations. Okay, so that makes sense. So good news. Amy, it's pretty clear when it comes to motion sickness, it's a habituation thing. So basically, the exposure, graded exposure to it, is how you handle it. And people with very severe motion sickness, in fact, can eliminate it using exposure, essentially. So um, with neural circuit dizziness, things can be a little more complicated because you have other sensations. You have other things that might be holding you back. It's not just motion sickness, which feels yucky but is not dangerous. Whereas with neural circuit dizziness, there are things that make you feel like you're actually in danger. So obviously, that is a factor. But in general, to me, as you do the work on the other neural circuit dizziness related stuff and you reduce your brain sensitivity in general, it's also going to reduce your brain sensitivity to these vestibular related things that's causing the motion sickness. And the ways to do that are, again, reducing the stress response and some habituation and exposure doing the thing. So those are my recommendations. Again, probably nothing surprising that I just said, but I hope that that at least clarified for you. Yeah. Okay. Oh, good. So Ashley says my answers were helpful about the timeline. I'm glad. I hope I didn't discourage anyone. I'm not trying to imply, oh, you're going to be sick for years and, sad. Like, no, it's not like that. It's just like, are you going to be ready to leave the community? Very possibly, like, very possibly. But different people leave the community at different times. Some people just, they like being here and they want to wait till they're like ready to close this chapter in their lives. So, um, again, it's what does recovery even mean is a very subjective question, honestly. I mean, if recovery means 100% elimination of symptoms, no limitations on activity, and I'm not thinking about it at all anymore, then that takes a while for most people. But does recovery mean feeling pretty much okay, every so often have an odd sensation, nothing's interfering with my life anymore, and I'm not really thinking about this anymore, and I'm enjoying my life, then that happens a lot more quickly for people. Okay. So Sarah says she does somatic tracking for 5 minutes each day. I focus on breathing calmly and do grounding before and after. When I do this, I get a lot of swaying and then it will kind of shift to a feeling of internal motion as well. I get this intense head pressure, pins and needles in my neck, and my neck tenses up automatically. Do you think this is my eyes getting overworked, or could it be a danger signal my brain is making to make me stop? Um, okay, great question. So, somatic tracking, is it too much for me? Yeah. So one of the things I know I talked to Sarah about, so just for context, that like if there's not always a clear cut, this is when you should stop and this is when you should go kind of answer. It's more that you're trying to get a read on your own nervous system and figure out what's too much for it and what's too much for it at the time. So I appreciate that she's asking this question, because this really gets kind of to the heart of like, how does my nervous system signal me that it's too much and should I believe it? Right. So, I I don't think this is your eyes getting overworked and it's actually in danger, but yes, of course, your eyes are sending you a danger signal because you're doing something to provoke symptoms. So, uh, do you need to provoke symptoms in order to recover? Yeah. Yeah, you do need to expose yourself to symptoms. So, in general, I would say what you're doing is perfectly fine. I would just make sure you're not like gritting your teeth and yelling at yourself to get yourself through it. But if you feel like, okay, this is not pleasant, but I can handle this, then do it. Yes, that I don't think that that's a bad thing. Okay. All right. So, okay. So Kato's question here. So she's asking about emotions. Okay. Um, I believe the one said I wanted to be a writer. So when thinking about stories, there are frequent times when I have to think about the negative aspects of people and not so good aspects of the world. This is where the above mentioned feelings of fear, loathing, anxiety, etc. are evoked. I do not want to avoid this process, so I'd like to know the disadvantage of this and if there are any countermeasures that can be taken against these disadvantages. Do you think we should take any special different measures? For example, reminding the brain that the thoughts are safe because it feels dangerous. Oh no, I totally get this. This is really cool. This is a great question. So Kato's a writer, so and she wants to write about tough stuff, writing about difficult emotions. And she's wondering, like, is there a disadvantage to doing this? Because I do kind of there's this whole Cato didn't say this, but there's this whole sense like if I'm creating it in my mind, then in a way my mind is living it. So is that potentially a disadvantage, or should I always be just thinking about happy things all the time, essentially? Really, really good question. Really good question. So there is something to what I spend my time thinking about is what my brain is going to dwell on. But remember, we have both a conscious and unconscious mind, and we're only controlling noticing what's in our conscious minds. We don't know what's going on in our unconscious mind, Cato. So even though you're wondering, is it okay for me to like kind of write about these very dark aspects of the world and feel some of these negative emotions in the context of my writing? It's very possible that that stuff's going on in your unconscious mind all the time anyway, so you're not really exposing yourself to more of that. Uh, it's really just more that you're putting pen to paper, and actually, if that's the case, writing is a very regulating activity. So even though in a way you are activating some of those patterns, you're activating those patterns in a way that is putting them into a narrative and into a story that's clearly not yours. I actually think that helps your brain separate from those things, in a way that's healthy and helps your brain learn to process negative or difficult emotions in a way that is actually quite healthy. This is why I I think, uh, I remember as a child, um, I I've always been a little sensitive to I can't watch horror movies. I can't watch scary movies. I don't like them. I just find them too scary. But I remember liking reading, not horror stories, but reading stories like with mystery and like, dark turns. And I remember I remember reading like when I was a really young kid, there was a series of books. What were they called? Scary stories to read in the dark? I don't know. I'm probably dating myself. Is there anyone else here from my generation who remembers the stories? Uh, there were the Goosebumps books. I don't know if that's still a thing. I really liked reading those. Anyway, my point was that there's something about the process of reading a written word or writing a word that helps us work through an emotion in a way that's very different from, uh, feeling that emotion or avoiding that emotion. It seems like it helps our prefrontal cortex, the thinking and analytical parts of the brain, um, regulate the parts of our brain that are involved with emotion. So, long story short, Cato, just kind of thinking through this question as I'm answering it, I think that it's perfectly fine for you to do that. Um, I just yeah, I actually think it might be very helpful to do that. I don't think it's a matter of, "Oh, I'm gonna be dwelling too much on negative things." But I do think that it's also good, if at all possible, to then have some time where you spend it in the present just trying to keep yourself present in the real world around you, like going out for a walk in the sun. I don't know what the weather is like in Japan right now. I don't know if it's winter. I think you guys are on the same season schedule as we are, so it may be cold right now. I don't know if the sun is out, but just getting outside, getting fresh air, feeling your feet on the ground, um, connecting to the earth, connecting to nature, it being in the present moment after you do something like that can help ground you and put you back kind of in the present state of mind, which is where you want to spend your time as much as possible. So I think that that's the way I would balance that out. Okay. So Sophia is asking about visual snow. Yeah. So with visual snow, Sophia, there's not a special technique for visual snow. Really, I think for visual snow, and I've seen this, the best thing I could do is educate you on it so that you know it's not harmful. It's your brain is just noticing stuff it's getting latched onto something that it thinks is dangerous, even though it's not. I have a video on this. So if you don't see the chat, please take a look at my channel. If you search for the words visual snow, you will find it. I don't have any specific suggestions on visual snow. Um, you obviously, in general, are going to want to manage and understand stress just the way you do for any other symptom. You're going to do emotional awareness just like you do with other symptoms. So, again, there's nothing really different about it. Um, the other thing you can do is a kind of somatic tracking where you actually try to see the visual snow, and you react to it with playfulness and with curiosity instead of with alarm. So rather than trying to avoid it and trying to constantly trying to make it go away, you actually say, oh, okay, cool, you're here. It's cool. Let's watch you for a little while and just kind of be with you, and let's invite a positive feeling in, or at least some neutrality or curiosity while I'm experiencing this. Okay. So eye floaters. So same thing with eye floaters. So many floaters in my eyes. I went to the eye doctor recently. So I have horrible vision. And I have to see a retinal specialist because my vision is so bad. And he noticed, he's like, Yoni, you have like the most eye floaters. You have so many eye floaters. And when he said that, I was like, oh man, I really do have a lot of eye floaters. But most of the time I just don't notice it because my brain just filters that stuff out. So, yeah. And then oh, okay, sorry, this is the second part of the question. She says, "I went 2 weeks without feeling dizzy, though I still notice visual snow. I'm now back to feeling a little dizzy. Is this part of recovery?" Yes, Sophia, yes, it is, and I'm so sorry that it is because it's such a pain. The symptoms ups and downs are just brutal, but welcome to the world of recovery with this. There are ups and downs every time. Do not worry. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. This is always how it looks. The symptoms switch around, they go up and down. This is what will happen. Recovery. Scott Ritter, one of our members who just has great advice. One of the things that he says is he kind of looks at each month as a chunk, or maybe even more than 1 month, maybe 2 or 3 months. So over time, you will see progress in the month to month range or the 2 or 3 month range. But if you look week to week, things are going to look very erratic because that's how recovery is. Okay, so Janice asked about contact lenses. Okay, so I noticed an almost immediate improvement in my contact lenses, had a few good, almost symptom free days. Um, and then my symptoms have been very mild, manageable for trying the contacts. So I thought I found the fix. Symptoms returned, but I'm leading up to my period that always causes an uptick. I've been to the eye doctor several times. They just keep increasing my prescription. My glasses that are most comfortable to me are actually 3 prescriptions ago. I started going to a new eye doctor with a new script. Could that be a factor? I've been doing so good. Haven't even watched a Q&A in at least a month. I love that. Yeah. Okay. So Janice, um, when you, this is a common thing. So you've been doing amazing, which is just so gratifying to me to hear. I love that. It just really makes me smile. When you when you're still dealing with neural circuit dizziness, even though things are a lot better, your brain's still going to be a little more sensitive than normal to changes in the various sensations associated with the balance system. So if you had a change in prescription, or you have a change in your vestibular system, or change in your sense of touch, those things could all cause your brain to say, wait a second, what's going on here? Because it's just not as flexible as it normally would be. Like normally there is an adjustment period. When I get new contact lenses, I definitely have an adjustment period, but it's usually, half a day. Whereas your brain's like, wait, what? Something changes and it's just going to be a little bit slower to adapt. So, I think this is also having to do just with what you're saying. The prescription that was most comfortable was 3 prescriptions ago. I've heard this from people before. Your symptoms, your vision is your visual processing is abnormally strong right now. In other words, even though your visual acuity, so your ability to see at distance is is the same because that's a physical acuity, your brain is devoting more resources to visual processing right now than it normally does. It's overweighting that processing. It's using more visual information than it normally does. And what that means is that once you sharpen up the acuity, your brain's getting even more information. It's getting even more information from the outside world. And your brain's again just not doing a great job of filtering that information to begin with. So then you add more information and your brain's like, oh crap, I haven't adjusted my filters. Now I'm getting way too much. Kind of like um, your brain had like bad sunglasses that were kind of like not quite dark enough. And then someone made the sun brighter. Like I mean, that's kind of the metaphor I'm thinking of. So yes, this makes sense to me. It's temporary. It is temporary. Do not worry about it. Your brain will adjust to this. So yeah, I'm glad you're doing great. Your contact lenses probably are the culprit. Just remind your brain everything's fine. Just take it easy, man. It's okay. Yes, you're getting more visual information than you're used to. It's okay. So just do your best to be just really not anxious about this. Okay. Again, as fun as that sounds and as easy as that sounds, right? So easy to just say, oh, I just won't be anxious. I'm kidding, by the way. If you're listening to this and you're like, that is terrible. I was totally joking. Okay. So yeah. So when standing still, I feel like I'm working so hard to stand. Janice says, like, I have to squeeze my butt cheeks. Okay, cool. It's just when standing still. I'm wondering if I'm just deconditioned from sitting. Um, I keep getting ads for somatic exercises. Is that something worth trying? My buttocks are tired. I hear you. Yeah. You know, Janice, this sounds also just like a compensation. Like this is your body saying, okay, so the eyes are giving us too much information. We're going to overcompensate for like the lack of balance we feel by now squeezing the butt. This is why a lot of people have leg symptoms. A lot of you guys have told me you have leg symptoms like leg heaviness or like shaking in your legs or your leg muscles always feel really tight. So I'm not saying somatic exercises would be bad. I mean, if you'd like to do that, you can. This is really though kind of not an unexpected thing. It may be partly habit and partly just an automatic, like, like, nerve-driven response, like, she is not balanced, therefore, let's balance her by tightening her up, and that's what's so tricky about neural circuit dizziness and what makes it, I think, harder than pain, because it becomes this very easy vicious cycle because the more tension you have, the more dizziness you have, which causes physical tension because your body reacts to dizziness with physical tension without you being anxious. But then that physical tension can also be interpreted by the brain as more anxiety. And then the anxiety kicks on and then the dizziness gets worse and blah, 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 blah. So do what you can to relax when you see that happen. Um, Continue doing the other things that you're doing because, again, clearly you're doing the right things since you've been feeling so much better. Give your eyes some time to adjust. I think this will be okay. Um, and as far as being deconditioned, this is another great question, Janice. I don't know that you're deconditioned, but what I can tell you is that one of the best ways to get your brain to adapt to this kind of stuff and be like, "Oh, okay, false alarm, man. I know how to balance," is to train your body. And I know I don't talk about this a lot because I think that's honestly not the problem for most people, but with this particular question, it's just I think it's important to say that by training your legs, by training your butt, by training those parts of your body that are involved in stabilizing you, they're going to get a better sense of how stable you actually are. Right now, those parts of your body, those nerves are overreacting, and they're less likely to overreact if they have a stronger brain body connection. So, um, the first adaptation that occurs in response to strength training is neural. So in other words, when someone gets stronger from strength training, the for the first 8 weeks, there is no actual change in muscle fiber density or actual like tensile strength. What's happening is you grow more nerves from your muscle to your spinal cord. Like there is actually an increase in nerve fibers that innervate your muscle. So in other words, your muscle plugs into your brain more when you do strength training. So if your muscle is better plugged into your brain and is better able to use information coming from your brain with better degrees of accuracy, you're less likely to overreact when your brain thinks that you're not stable, if that makes sense. Okay. So I don't know if that logic made sense to you, but I would love to see everyone do physical training. Yeah. Yeah. So Janice, I would love to see you do strength training. I would love it. And remember, strength training is wonderful and awesome. I'm telling you, you don't have to believe me now. You can come back and tell me that you believe me later. It is so much more fun than cardio. Cardio sucks. I'm saying this with humor, but cardio really sucks. I hate cardio. I only do it because I'm supposed to. Okay. It is not a thing. It is not fun. It makes you sweat. It makes your heart race and you're breathing fast. It's like, but strength training, it feels good. It's like you get like a pump and you're feeling better and you feel more stable and you feel stronger and you see the gains and the weight you can lift increases and then you see little muscles growing. It's fun. Strength training is fun and it can really help in situations like this. So thank you for asking that question and letting me talk about it. I don't have a strength video I would recommend. One of the major things on my to-do list. So 2024, I have two big things on my to-do list. And then I have one smaller thing on my to-do list. And the smaller thing on my to-do list is a strength training program. I don't know if I'll get to it. The other two things are gigantic and it's probably going to take me all year, but the strength training program I think would be so great. I don't have channels for that. I actually don't like follow along videos. Um, I like written programs because especially when you have neural circuit dizziness, I really want you listening to your body and not to an instructor. I want you to take full rest periods. I want you to hang around, listen to a podcast or some music you enjoy, and then come back for a second round of exercises. Um, the best strength training, if you have some knowledge of strength training, if you've never and strength trained, this may not be appropriate, but I love Sohee Lee's program. It's like, I think it's like $40. You can buy it. It's like a year-long program. Sohee Lee, I just put her name in the chat. Here, let me see if I can find it online. So Sohee Lee, she has like a PDF program that you can buy. That's a year-long strength training program, and you can do it at home or at the gym. Let's see, Year of Strength 2022. Okay, here it is. It's $39. Okay, here. I feel like I would love to get her on my channel, but she has like a gigantic Instagram following. So there is just absolutely no way she'd be interested in talking to me. So here's her website. There's the program I'm talking about. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So there it is. So in this one, basically it has it's a strength training program for intermediate to advanced. You have 12 months of programming, and you can do it either 2 days a week or 3 to 4 days a week. They're home-based workouts or gym-based workouts. You can do either one. Again, if you've never strength trained, this might not be the right program for you, but it's really great. It's by a woman, which I'm sorry, gentlemen, I love men's strength training programs too, but for women who want to start strength training, I think it can be really helpful to have a woman instructor. So please consider about that. Yeah. Consider that. Yes. And if any of you do Sohee Lee's program, it is so amazing. Again, if you do it, then you should totally write to her and be like, I am a paying customer and you should go be interviewed by Dr. Yo because she wants to promote your program because she thinks you're awesome and doesn't want to have to write her own strength training program. So, well, for people with dizziness anyway. So there you go. Plug for Sohee's program, who again knows nothing about me or anything about what I do. Okay. So, so Tiffany Road Rogbra, I don't know what that is. You know, Mark, you are like this fiend cyclist and I am so not. The only time you will find me doing anything long distances if I am trying to run away from something that's trying to eat me. And in that case, if I'm running that far, I'm probably a goner anyway. So anyway, yeah, get a bicycle and ride with your friends, Mark says. Yes, I know. Everyone says that this would be good, but I like lifting weights and I lift weights with friends, or I would if I had anyone who would get up at 4:45 with me. But Philip comes into the gym with me now. He works out with me. He comes in around 6. So it's a little bit later in the morning. But anyway, okay. that was a little bit of an aside, and I went over, and I'm sorry, and you guys are amazing, and I love you all, and guess what? We have only 1 Q&A left this year, believe it or not, and I think it will be on Wednesday next week. I hope you will all be there. Um it's a little 500-mile ride, Mark says, with 30,000 friends across the state of Iowa. I Yeah, Mark, I'm looking at you with the same expression that people give me when I tell them about my cold plunging. They're like, "Not sure why you would do that, but go you. That sounds really badass. Glad someone else can carry that torch because I'm not doing that." So, that sounds like a real blast though, although I don't know. 500 miles would be very painful for one's bottom, so I don't know. I don't know how people manage that situation. A whole week of riding. Oh my gosh. But I bet such a bonding experience between you and friends. All right. Well, yes. Oh, and Lori, good to see you. Thank you. Happy holidays to all. Yes, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me, Lori. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, please enjoy your time off or your Chinese food or whatever it is that your non-holiday tradition is. I can't wait to see you all next week. I hope you have a steady holiday. And I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye, everyone.